Hello and welcome to the Dr. Ayaz Safi podcast. I am pleased to be joined by Dr. Irfan Khawaja, who is a senior lecturer in physical education at Birmingham City University. Prior joining Birmingham City University, Dr. Khawaja was a PE teacher and head of the department across various schools. In addition to teaching at BCU, he teaches across different modules and courses. He's also an active researcher who has published various physical activity and health related journals in highly impact factor publication journals. This year, Dr. Khawaja has produced the much needed physical education and physical activity guideline for PE and physical activity during Ramadan for schools and education settings. So, Dr. Khawaja, thank you for joining me in this episode.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, it's a pleasure. Now, the impact of this guideline that you have produced, PE and school sports, PE and physical activity for schools and also educational setting has already been observed from the media that we have seen and the outreach and the interest that people have shown into this much needed guideline. The question is, why isn't or didn't there was already one in place, given that the importance of PE and physical education and physical activity participation?
Okay, so I think firstly, looking at where we are in 2024, based here in the West Midlands, we live in a very multicultural society. And I think over the last 20 years, particularly since I left school when I was a young student, ever since we graduated at university, children and young people nowadays are more inquisitive. They're asking more questions. They're more culturally aware of their friends, their peers, their colleagues, their teachers, of what faiths they believe in, what foods they eat, what prayers they pray, what religious observations they follow. And I think nowadays there's more of a celebration of religion, a celebration of culture. Social media is very powerful as well. A range of different social media platforms now celebrate different things, whether that's from Ramadan or whether it's through Lent or whether it's through Christmas, whether it's through Diwali. There's so many different observations of different faith, cultures and religions out there now that young people are more aware of them, they are exposed to them, and naturally they have more of a desire to learn more about it. So now in 2024, it makes sense that we are now showcasing what Ramadan is all about. We are now celebrating the fact that Muslims who are fasting during Ramadan can still engage in physical education. They should still be engaging in sport, physical activity, continue to lead these healthy and active lifestyles. Whereas I think 15, 20, 30 years ago, it may well have been that there was a lack of education for teachers or for staff or the wider workforce. They perhaps didn't have the confidence to ask the questions, perhaps there wasn't the awareness out there, and maybe there wasn't anyone there who could step forward and say, this is what Ramadan is. The guidance that you're referring to has been published by the Association for PE. They are our national subject lead for physical education, but it's also been written in association with the Muslim Council of Britain, the Youth Sports Trust and the Chartered Institute for the Management of Sport and Physical Activity. So this very much has not just been written by me. Yes, I am the lead author on this paper, but it's been written in unity with all of the other organisations, because there clearly is a call and a need for this guidance to be published, and that's where we are right now.
Excellent stuff. And two things that I need to ask you on what you just said. One was about the confidence of the experts or the people that were already in the field. Another thing, that people are now becoming more aware. You mentioned especially the youth asking more and more questions. So I'm based on those two things. What now do you think is it important for these schools and education settings to accommodate and support the students of the different faiths, but in this case the fasting students, for example, as well as staff during Ramadan?
Yeah, sure. So I think within schools, universities, colleges, any form of educational setting, the main thing that we need to make sure is that we are accommodating for all of the needs of all of our students, whether they are fasting or non-fasting. Now this guidance is, the focus is on Ramadan. Now, as we know within the guidance, Ramadan, it moves through the solar calendar, it follows the lunar calendar. Every year it's going to be 11, 12 days earlier. Now, what does that mean for us as those working in education? It means that Ramadan is never ever going to be in the same place every single year. It's going to move earlier through the year. So it may fall during mock exams. It may fall during at university during assessment weeks. It might fall during A-level or GCSE assessment periods. So it's going to have an impact regardless of which educational establishment you teach in. But one thing that I mentioned at the conference on the 29th of January is that the planning should not be the week before Ramadan. Teachers and those line managers and the senior leadership team should not be panicking a week before Ramadan thinking, we need to get ready for Ramadan, it's falling in assessment week, it's falling during moderation, it's falling during whatever. These conversations need to be had in the summertime before schools finish for the summer holidays. So the following year when they come back in September, they know exactly when Ramadan is going to fall, and then they can accommodate for their students' needs in advance. Because the last thing that you want to do is start panicking thinking Ramadan's going to fall, let's say in March like it is now, and we find out that, well, it actually happens to be that March is mock exam week, and that's going to have an impact on students' ability to concentrate perhaps, which is going to have a knock-on effect on results and data. Now we know that if in education we are very much data driven, well, if that data is skewed because of Ramadan, then obviously we need to have some conversations, and that comes down to planning.
No, that's very good. And I think one of the things you mentioned about the impact of the guideline that is going to have on students in schools and also at university and the assessments as well. I think we've already seen the impact that this guideline has created in such a short span of the time. And I think in the long run, I think the impact will be getting better and bigger. You've been a PE teacher in school. Now you teach PE at university levels. What are, and also you are practicing Muslim as well, so you practice fasting and so you participated in physical education as well as the physical activity, and you taught it as well and still teaching it. What are some of the challenges that PE teachers as well as the students who participate in PE classes kind of go through?
I'll give you two sides of the coin. The first side of the coin I'll talk about is from a student's perspective, and the second part of the coin, or the other side of the coin, is going to be from a staff perspective. So from a student's perspective, it's not uncommon for teachers and staff to find that children, young people and students, when they are fasting, they'll have lower energy levels because there's less fuel coming in, there's less fuel to use. Lacking concentration, their span of concentration may be limited. They may find that some students, because of the lack of energy levels and concentration, they may not be as sociable. They might want a little bit of quiet time or downtime. Some students might be quite the opposite though. Some students, you would not know if they were fasting or not. You know, so it's very, very important as staff professionally to understand that some of your students may show and display differences in their behaviours, whereas some you wouldn't be able to tell. That also has a knock-on effect as a professional members of staff of how much support you give. This intervention. Now again, some students, like myself, when I was a young fasting PE student, I didn't want the attention. I just carried on as per normal. I enjoyed PE, I enjoyed school. I didn't need staff to say, oh, Irfan, do you need anything? Do you want me to put this on for you? Do you need that? Do you want a quiet space or anything like that? I was very much carrying on as per normal, because don't forget Ramadan teaches us that we are supposed to carry on as normal anyway. So we shouldn't be, you know, raising awareness or drawing in unnecessary attention. However, I'm not saying that staff shouldn't be aware of the fact that some of their children or young people are fasting because of the health and safety implications. For example, if you've got students like I was in school when I was 16 years old and I did the multi-stage fitness test, otherwise known as the bleep test. Now, if I'm nil by mouth and I'm running a VO2 max test, there's naturally associated some high level risk there.
Yeah.
And God forbid something were to happen to me, the school would be liable.
Yeah.
So therefore there's some need there for students to be just checked in on and made sure that activities are tailored. But if we flip it to the other side of the coin from the fasting PE teacher's perspective, well, there's also risks associated there as well, because what happens when you've got someone who is fasting and they've got 30 children in their duty of care, and let's say they are, like I was as a member of staff, outside in the heat wave teaching the javelin. Again, you are putting the children's lives at risk, let alone your own. So there needs to be awareness from line managers, heads of department, head teachers, governors, which staff in their school, in their university are fasting, and what are they teaching during Ramadan? Are there any risks, potential risks associated with their workload during that Ramadan month?
That's a very good point you noted there, and especially from your experience when you were a student, like for example when you participated in the bleep test. Now, the guideline that you produced does provide some recommendations for modifying and adapting the physical activities during the class, during the PE sessions, especially during Ramadan for fasting students. So, based on your experience then that you actually did it yourself, for example, and also in addition to the recommendations that are in the guideline, can you expand on some of these recommendations, that why are they important? I know you talked about
that learning. All students, regardless of their religious backgrounds, their beliefs, their culture, their language, either way, everybody of their level of ability, they can all access your lesson, full stop, because that's what we are measured on. Now, let's say that you are teaching a particular activity, and let's say that you are doing an athletic session. It may be that you wish to modify and decrease the intensity of the activity that you are doing. So, for example, let's say rather than do, say, the 1500 meters or anything that is long distance endurance running, we modify the activity, and instead for the month of Ramadan we do something that is more kind of skill-based activities. Maybe we do something like shot put or discus or javelin, where there is going to be some energy levels involved, but it's not going to be burning out energy levels, enduring energy levels over lengthy periods of time. Equally, you may wish to have them working in pairs or in group work, so they're not constantly on the go, they take it in turns, or maybe they take on a separate role, a leadership role within the activity, or maybe they're doing some peer assessment, and they are going to be doing the assessments during that particular week. So there's always ways which you can modify activity. Trampolining is another one. Rather than have your standard 10 bounce sequence, you might choose to do a 5 or a 6 bounce sequence, reducing the number of reps or the number of attempts where they are performing a skill on the trampoline bed is a very simple but effective way. We can go through many of the activities. Swimming is another one that's commonly spoken about. From an Islamic perspective, we know that no fluid should be entering the mouth and making its way down the throat, which will nullify that fast. However, even when I was teaching swimming as a fasting PE teacher, I would have some of my students who were fasting, they'll work on backstroke. So you reduce that risk. You reduce the intensity, you reduce the risk, so then you reduce the risk of water going in the mouth. Or you work on skill, leg kick, for example, or you use aids in the water like floats to help them and support them. Or you have them treading water, or actually you can have them do land training outside of the pool. So there's lots of different things you can do.
It is, and I think that you talked about your experience as a PE, participating in a PE classes, and also you being a PE teacher at school, and now you are teaching PE at a much higher level at university. The guideline also sets up some guidelines and recommendations for modifying certain activities, the intensities, and so on. So what is your recommendation in addition to what's in the guideline? How people can modify and recommend certain activities, for example. Can you expand on that at all?
Yeah, sure. So within the guidance itself, I go through each of the areas of activity. We have a national curriculum that we need to follow. So particularly for those who are doing their teacher training, they need to make sure that they follow the national curriculum and that everyone can access their lessons, regardless of whether they're fasting or not. Now, one thing that most staff are aware of is that during the month of Ramadan they can reduce intensity of activities. Lowering the intensity means that they are not going to have their children or young people burning calories or using high levels of energy expenditure. However, that doesn't mean that they aren't accessing their lessons. So if we take an example like athletics, for example, where there's a range of different activities within athletics that you can teach, rather than have have the students do long distance endurance activities, reduce it. Maybe have them working on a relay or looking at some of the striking and fielding activities. Have a look at something where they are doing lower level intensities like javelin, which might be a short burst, discus, shot put, even things like a standing long jump. Equally, you might have them doing things like peer assessment, looking at assessing each other, or taking on a role like leadership within the session. Other activities like swimming have always been very interesting because from my experience of teaching swimming, you may wish to, rather than submerge the head in water when they are swimming, which of course increases the risk of taking water in, which will nullify the fast, you can have them working on things like backstroke, or maybe look at doing working on treading water, or you might have them using floats in the water to help support them, or equally you might actually say we're going to do land training, which is outside of the pool in itself. So there's ways around teaching and modifying your activities.
Thank you for that. You mentioned something about peer assessment and leadership, and I think PE is one of the subject where the leadership can be really adapted, which can be really utilized later in life as well. So, say for example, if there's a peer assessment and then there's that leadership skills that the students who are fasting and can't participate in high intensity activities, so they could potentially lead it, that will also help in promoting inclusivity and creativity in schools as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and this is one thing that we say, that physical education, PE is more than just a subject. It's a lot more than just learning about the activities taught within the curriculum. Looking at things like teamwork, collaboration with your peers within the group, leading a group, building up that self-confidence and self-esteem, and being aware of each other's abilities and being able to assess each other as well from a practical perspective. Perseverance, resilience, all of these different key skills that young people need to know when they leave school and go in to university, college and university, and when they go and get their first job, they're going to need to know how to work practically, particularly in if they're taking on practical nature jobs and professions in the future. So it is a lot more than just a subject. It's very, very important.
Absolutely, and I think Ramadan is kind of the best month to start implementing those activities or traits into the students, especially those who are observing Ramadan and can't participate in high intensity activities, for example.
Yeah, it is, and that, like we said earlier, I think it's more nowadays it's important because people are beginning to realise, well, some of the schools that I've been in just this week and last week, they know, my best friend, he's fasting this month, it's Ramadan. They're not Muslims, but they know and they are aware that this is Ramadan, and this is what their best friend does, and they're going to be fasting. So when they fast, they don't want to eat in front of them, or they might be a little bit quieter. So if the children and the young people and the students in schools are aware of their friends' behaviours and their friends' cultures and their friends' beliefs, then it's important as staff that we also are aware of what our other co-members of staff's religious beliefs are as well.
Absolutely. And that leads me to another question of mine, which is about because the guideline does outline some of the misconceptions about physical activity, PE, during Ramadan, and some common misconceptions as well. So what do you think, from your view, as a practicing Muslim and who observe Ramadan and worked in schools and across different disciplines. What are some of the common misconceptions, and how can an educator address them about physical activity, physical education, as well as just the common misconceptions during Ramadan?
Sure. I think first of all, section 1 in the guidance gives a very clear indication of what Ramadan is. Obviously, it's been written and it's been scrutinised by the Muslim Council of Britain, so it is an accurate interpretation. There are many different schools of thought around there in this country, around the world, of what they believe Ramadan to be is. However, this is as accurate as you can get. The common misconceptions are there from an educational perspective. So, for example, one of them I talk about in the guidance is about being nil by mouth. Does that include water or fluid, or not include water or fluid? Now, some out there may think that Ramadan you don't eat anything, but you're allowed to drink water. That's false. Yeah, so it's nil by mouth, including no water, no fluid whatsoever. So for when we are teaching PE, physical activity and sport, you have to bear in mind hydration levels of the children and the staff. Because some people out there think that actually, well, as long as they can drink, they'll be fine. You can't drink. Yeah. Number 2, I'll give you 3 examples. Sure. Number 2, often people think, okay, Muslims, when they are fasting during Ramadan, you fast from sunrise to sunset. That's false. You don't fast from sunrise to sunset. You fast from dawn until sunset. Dawn being 6 degrees of when the earth is below the horizon. So therefore, there should be no sun, no daybreak as we call it. So there should be no sun visible whatsoever as you start that fast. Sunrise is when the sun has risen. Yeah. So therefore,
and it's a lot more visible.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. So that's the second misconception. And the third one is, and I'll give you a personal example on this one. One of the schools that I taught at, I was new into the school, and it had a high percentage of ethnic minorities within the school. And I was going to teach my PE lesson, and there was a line of children who came to me with their homework diaries, and they were saying, okay, my son or my daughter is not allowed to do PE today because they're fasting because it's Ramadan. And I said to them, well, I'm also fasting and I'm also observing Ramadan. So does that mean I don't have to do PE either? And of course I had to do PE because I was teaching it. Yeah. And I made them all get changed, and they all did PE. And the amount of challenge that I was faced with from parents, the head teacher, governors, you name it, that I had made the children do PE during Ramadan, and they were trying to use Ramadan as an excuse not to get changed or not to do it. And yet when I was on lunchtime duty on the playground, I could see that the same children are running around playing football, playing cricket, playing basketball. And I was just thinking, so at lunchtime you're not allowed to eat or you're not allowed to drink, but you're running around playing sports, but you're not going to do PE. There's something wrong here. And they were using Ramadan as an excuse not to do or not to engage in PE. Now, my argument is I understand that PE is a physical and a practical subject. I understand that. However, were the same children using Ramadan as an excuse not to go to maths, not to do English, not to do science, not to do French? Well, no, you wouldn't go to those subjects and say, well, I'm fasting so I can't do this subject. The same way here that you shouldn't be coming to PE and saying, I can't do it because I'm fasting.
I see. So this is a good point.
One.
So, thank you for that information. Since you developed this guideline and it has been widely implemented from what we have seen, in your view, can you share any example of best practice from schools that have successfully implemented strategies to accommodate students and staff during Ramadan, especially from your guideline?
So we now have roughly 75% of schools who have implemented the guidance already.
That's across the UK?
Across the UK nationally. Now, the aim is 100% of schools take it in and they have a look at it and implement it. It has also gained attraction from the government, from the Department for Education, and they're also very interested in the guidance, currently reviewing it at the moment. And we hope that this will be implemented in every school nationally within the country. Now, in terms of examples of practice that is exemplary, there are some schools that have, let's say, adjusted their extracurricular program.
Excellent.
So, for example, they front load the activities. So, for example, they'll have more activities at kind of before school and at break time, and they'll have fewer activities after school because they know maybe some of the students, they need to go home earlier to rest, maybe go to the mosque, maybe they might need to go and help prepare for the evening meal for iftar. So their responsibilities after school have increased.
Yeah.
So what they do is they provide more opportunities at other windows within the school day, so they can still enjoy and maintain a healthy and active lifestyle. Other examples, networking. The best schools and teachers within schools, they network and they share good practice. So what does that look like in one school? Can they share that with another? So for example, what I've just mentioned about front loading the extracurricular program, that has been shared widely now, and other schools have adopted the same. Where does that come from? It's come from networking. From sharing is caring. Absolutely. So therefore, if you can share good practice at one school with another, maybe within an academy partnership or within a school's partnership, then that's the best way of learning about best practice. And then in terms of more examples, is more to do with staff training, workshops, webinars that I've done in the past, and there's more coming up as well. I've done a webinar for the Association for PE. There's another webinar coming up that I'm doing for BASES. And then there's a few more workshops and teacher training sessions that I'll be going and delivering out in schools as well, as part of staff training in CPD. This again is going to provide with real life examples of how schools can adopt best practice. Nice,
that's excellent stuff. You mentioned about staff, for example, and the networking. If I may follow from there, we talked lots about the inclusion of the students during Ramadan, PE and physical activity, and I know you touched base on the staff elements as well. But what are some of the key considerations for those staff who observe Ramadan, especially PE teachers, for example, during Ramadan, and how can schools support them? And if we take that out, that the PE teachers, if we leave that side, for example, we go to personal trainers or the community activities that people runs it, for example, what is your advice to them? They would be personal trainers, they'll be fasting, for example, but equally they might be delivering sessions, exercise sessions, high intensity sessions. Also, the people who generally likes to engage in day-to-day exercise activities, what is your advice to them?
I'll give you an example from one colleague at a school that I taught at who was a non-Muslim, and he wanted to know what it felt like to be observing Ramadan, and we came up with an initiative, an idea, and we called it Fast for a Day. Okay. And this is where staff at the school, they fasted for a day to get a feel for what it was like, really what it felt like to fast, the struggles, the challenges, and then when, for example, during the summer, the peak of the summer, when it really was difficult, and they got a real life example of what it was like to fast during the warmer summer months.
I see. Much longer days compared to now.
Much longer days, much longer days. Now, why did they do that? They wanted to do that because they wanted to kind of get a feel for what it was like and understand what I was going through. And one of the things, and I say this when I go out and deliver workshops and at the conference as well, that staff who may be personal trainers or coaches or working within the community or in the public sector, police force, armed services, armed forces, fire service, paramedics, radiographers, nurses, midwifery, all of these people who are serving us practically have hands-on jobs. It is not just the physical component of energy. One thing that I've found is the first thing that goes, and I struggle with, is my eyes. Because the lack of water and the lack of hydration to the eyes, my eyes begin to sting. And nowadays, screen time plays a big part in our daily lives, whether that's looking at phones, tablets, PCs, laptops, overhead projectors. You're constantly looking at screen, and that is constantly using your eyes and straining your eyes all the time. So be aware of members of staff when they're looking at screens. You are using energy and you are dehydrating your eyes the more that you use it, because when you blink there's a lack of fluid there, they're not as hydrated as normal. Other things staff need to be made aware of in schools or in any environment where they professionally work. Just be aware that if you can provide a quiet space, a reflective room for prayer or thought, or just to get away from everything, just so that they can have 5 minutes, 10 minutes of reflection during the day, that is time for them to recharge, reset, recharge. And particularly in the last 10 days of Ramadan, often known as the 10 most holy days in Ramadan, are often the most challenging, because you are nearing the end, fatigue is really settling in, and now we're at a point where we need as much support as possible professionally to get through.
Okay, good, thank you for that. You mentioned about the public services, you particularly kind of refer to the police and other public services, personals. Can this guideline be applied to them as well during Ramadan?
Yeah, so that's the next step. That's where we are going now. So this guidance was intended for just those working within physical education. But what we have since found is that the guidance now can be extended beyond.
Okay.
So that goes beyond just physical education. It's actually now looking at education as a whole.
Okay.
And now that we're having conversations to roll some form of guidance similar to this out, so that those working in all professions in the public sector have something in place to support them as well. It won't be too dissimilar. The guidelines will be similar to what we have here, but they will be more appropriate and more relevant for the skills that they have in their particular workforce. That's the next step.
That would be a very good step, I think, following on from this successful guide. My next question is, what is your view on how can schools collaborate with Muslim communities, parents, or other stakeholders to ensure a comprehensive and culturally sensitive approach in terms of accommodating Ramadan and also beyond? For example, we know from research that Muslims or British South Asian, for example, or ethnic minority are less prone to be physically active or kind of participate in the health and well-being types of interventions. What do you think the education sector, especially schools, and now you talked about the other public sectors as well, what can they do to engage that community more?
So I'll give you some examples of what I've learned just over the last 2 weeks of some great practice some schools are already doing. One school in particular, and I know this has been adopted across many schools, are having iftar events at the school. They invite parents, families, local imams to come into school, and this one is on a Friday, and they host iftar at the school. The head teacher and the governors are saying our school is reflective of a high Muslim population. We need to respect their faith, but also we want to build relationships with our community, our local mosque, our local parents, our families, and also the students and the children get a feel of pride that this is our place of study, but this is also like a family to us. And they have a lot of respect for their teachers. That helps with their levels of academic success at the school, because they feel a sense of loyalty to the school, and they can feel the respect given from the teachers. This is a two-way process. It is not just schools saying, you do as I say. This is schools saying, we are aware and we are going to accommodate and we respect you as a Muslim. Furthermore, what schools can also do, if they are not already, is they should be liaising and reaching out to their local mosques. They will have a whole wealth of different events during Ramadan that they are hosting. A mosque local to me, where I live, they have numerous events during the month of Ramadan, educational events, teaching brothers, sisters, and some for young children as well, so that they understand the importance of it, but they're all tailored in a way that they feel it's meaningful information. What does that do? It creates relationships, strong relationships within the community. Children, young people, teachers, local imams, they all learn about each other, and they all learn how that they can lean on each other and learn from each other and use each other to help celebrate our holy month of Ramadan. And that is beyond Ramadan. That is for a load of different religious celebrations as well.
Thank you. That's
One.
I guess my next question is, where do we find or access this guideline from?
Okay, so the paper itself, this is it here, is published by the Association for PE, and this is available to download for free as a PDF, and you can get this from the Association for PE website.
Okay.
If you just type in Ramadan guidance, this one will come up, and you can download everything and have a look through, save it, share it, email it, print it off if you like, totally up to you, but it's available from the Association for PE, and this copy is for you as well.
Oh, thank you. Excellent. Yeah. I will also share the link of this guide from obviously the Association for Physical Education with this video, so every way you see this, you'll be able to see the link to this guide as well. Thank you. Well, this groundbreaking PE and physical education in Ramadan guideline that Dr. Irfan Khawaja has produced is amazing from what we have seen in this short span of time and the attention that it has grasped already. And I do not have a doubt that many people in schools and also in public services, especially when you talked about the new edition that will come up as well with time, will only get better and bigger and benefit the public. So thank you, Dr. Khawaja, for your time, and good luck with everything that you do.
Thank you very much, and wishing everyone a very peaceful Ramadan for this holy month, and inshallah I will speak with you all again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good time.